For those that don't know my story, my name's Pastor Robbie. I'm based in Auckland now. I've been in New Zealand for about 10 years. My father's Scottish, mum's Australian, and been in ministry. I've led 2 churches now, and for the last 3-4 years, I've been in evangelism. So I have the wonderful privilege of traveling all over New Zealand and the world, preaching the gospel, doing miracle crusades, and believing God for great things. And it's been a wonderful season. But my story really actually begins with my father. My father, as I mentioned, is Scottish, and he comes from a prestigious line of criminals. Thank you, brother. I feel at home. I'm not going to lie. I feel at home, and you're going to find out why. My father grew up in Scotland, and his father, my grandfather, was part of a little gang, 3 brothers, the McCann brothers, who were notorious in Glasgow, Scotland, which was a pretty rough city. If you go over there, it's like old school gangland crime, man. It's mafia stuff. And they were over there, and basically my grandfather and his 2 brothers were notorious. They were some of the underbelly movement that brought speed, ecstasy, cocaine into the UK and were trafficking it. So to this day, I have a whole lot of family in the UK that are very much involved in that whole side of life. So my dad grew up like that, and at the age of 12, he grew up in a violent home, domestic violence. Many of you know the story, but alcoholism, violence, abuse, sexual abuse. He'd watched his mum be stabbed, watched his mum be dragged across the living room as a child, just violence, adultery, just affairs. He would be dragged from one girlfriend's house to the next girlfriend while his father was cheating on his wife, and it was just a messy situation. At the age of 12 years old, my father was in bed, and out the front of the apartment where they were staying, a drug deal had gone wrong, something had gone bad, and they followed my grandfather, stalked him to the outside of his home, and right out the front of the house where my dad was sleeping, they stabbed him 27 times to death. So I never met my grandfather. That was the background that my father came from. And so my story, if I was to look back into the UK, even to this day, there's criminals and guys trafficking all the way to this day. So my father, they emergency emigrated him to Australia. Him and his family, they said, we got to get you out of here. This is an unsafe environment. He ran away with his mum. They got over to Australia. But you can imagine what that does to a child. Some of you know firsthand what that does. And so he's messed up in the head. He's super angry at the world. He's hurt. He's angry. And so for the next 3 years, they tried to put him in schools. He got kicked out of every single school. He was in and out of juvenile prisons his whole young, early 13, 14, 15. By the age of 14, no school would have him. He just walked away. He joined the gang at 14. Guys that were 19, 20, bikers, the whole lot. My dad's got marijuana tats all up his arms. He was that guy. And at the age of 16, he commits an armed robbery with a whole bunch of older guys that went really wrong. Some people got properly hurt, and the next thing, they went on the run trying to avoid police, but they caught him. And because there was so much crime happening in Scotland at the time, in Perth, West Australia at the time where they'd emigrated, they decided to make an example of my father. And because he had been in and out of juvie so many times, they were like, we can't even deal with you. We're not even going to look at you again. We're not giving you a child sentence. And my father was the first teenager in Australian history to be tried in the Supreme Court of Australia as an adult. And they gave him a mandatory life sentence, which is called governor's pleasure. Governor's pleasure was what they do in Australia, in America, when you need a presidential pardon. The only person that can release you from prison is the Governor General of Australia himself that can sign your release papers. For some reason, the guy he went in with did a whole lot of time, but forgot how many know God's a merciful God. For some reason, after 3 years, and I can promise you it wasn't for good behavior, 3 years ended and they let him out. They gave him a chance. He got out at 19 years old, and he did exactly what you expect he would do. He went straight to the pub, got drunk, got high, hooked up with the bartender, took the bartender home, and got in a relationship with this girl. It turns out, because God just loves to orchestrate things, that this girl was a backslider who had walked away from God completely, but her mother was a born-again Christian. Her mother was 60 years old, beautiful lady, white, bright hair, man, like angel style. And she would come over to the house where he was living. You can imagine. He's rough, shaved head, earrings, tats all over him. Gangster, doesn't want anything to do with life, doesn't say hi, doesn't smile, just nothing going on in here, just hate. He's with this girl. It's an abusive relationship, but it is what it is. They're both dysfunctional. They're both messed up. And this older, lovely woman would come to the house. Her name's Judy. And she would say, Neil, I believe in you. I know God's got more for you. I know your life doesn't have to stay like this. Trust me, there's a different way. There's a hope. There's a joy. There's a peace. There's a love. And he said, man, it was uncomfortable. I've never heard of love. I had no church background. He didn't even realize that Christ and Christmas were related. Zero religious background at all. It wasn't until he was saved for a year that he saw the Christmas card and went, oh, hang on, Christ. Zero religious. And he got radically, so how's this? So he's at a party. Remember back in the day, some of y'all remember this, depending on your age. I'm coming on 40, but this is going back a little bit. But there was these tracts that they used to hand out, chick tracts, and it'd be like, turn or burn, repent or die, Jesus is coming back. And people would hand out this material on the streets, and you'd take it home, and he'd be doing acid trips and like coke and stuff, and he's looking at this stuff just tripping out. And at a party, this party went real crazy one night. And he's there with a bunch of guys. Everyone's high as a kite, him included. And he's there with his girlfriend, and all of a sudden, he had this encounter with God. In the middle of this party, man, he just stands up and just turns to everybody and says, Jesus is coming back. You don't understand. We're all going to hell unless we repent and turn. And he just started preaching like that. And he starts going for it. And then he turns to his girlfriend and says, take me to your mum's house. I'm getting saved tonight. She says, absolutely not. So he grabbed her by the hair and said, take me to your effing mum's house right now. I'm getting saved. I'll be real for a second. She didn't have much of a choice then. Got in the car, drove him to Judy's house. And as he gets there, Judy's a nurse in a full white frock with bright white hair, walking up the steps of this little house with a little light above the... And he's like, he's already high. Now he needs Jesus. Now he sees an angel, right? He's like, oh my gosh. He ran up to the stairs and just said, Judy, man, my life is a mess. I need Jesus. I need what you're talking about. She broke down and knelt down right there on the porch, man, led my father to Jesus. In one night, generational curses, bondage, addiction, it was broken, man. Everything changed from that night forward. He spent about 6 months working out the weed thing, but everything else in that moment, he journeyed that thing, but he saw the change. It was like everything changed. He suddenly had a future for himself. He suddenly saw hope. He suddenly saw a chance to be different, for life to change. He saw something new for his future. And God did exactly what he says in Jeremiah 29:11. I know the thoughts I have for you. I know the plans, not to hurt you, not to harm you, but to give you a future and a hope. And he said, I see that. I want that. And he fought for it. I stand here today never having known what domestic violence was like in my home, never knowing the cycle of addiction in my home, never having that upbringing where I hated the world. Why? Not because I deserved anything, but because Jesus was so good that he would set somebody free so radically and powerfully that the generational onflow of that was I got to walk in freedom because of his freedom. And I want to encourage someone that's been set free this morning. It's not just about you. One day your son, your daughter, your family will walk in a freedom that you never had because of what God did in you. It's worth it to fight and keep going. I'm so grateful my father just said, you know what? I'm not going back. I'm never going back. He saw his chance and he took it. And I walk in that freedom every day. Privileged and blessed. Every generational wall, it just broke. I look back at his family, heroin addiction, the whole lot, all through this family, still to this day. And I see him and 2 of his siblings that have given their life to Jesus, just free. It's like watching black and white, and I just go, thank the Lord for his grace and his goodness. Those walls, man, they just fell. This morning, I want to preach a message called The Wall's Got to Fall. The wall must fall. Because how many know we've all got walls in our life? We really do. We've all got walls. A wall is anything that's standing in the way of you and the promise of God. It's any barrier in the way to your breakthrough. And the truth is, your wall might not be so extreme, or your wall may be more extreme. But we've all got walls. Walls of bitterness, walls of anger, walls of hate. Come on, walls of resentment, walls of hurt, walls of insecurity, relational walls, financial walls. The truth of the matter is we all walk through seasons, and the thing between us and what God has for us is this huge wall. And sometimes it's like, you can be in the house of God and still have walls. You can be here this morning all cleaned up and still have walls. Here's the problem. For some of y'all, those walls have been there so long, you started painting the wall. You decorating the wall. Your whole world revolves around the wall. And that issue has become your identity. Not only is it a wall in your life, it's the feature wall. Check out my wall. Your theology is wrapped around that wall. Your victimhood is wrapped around that wall. Your whole perspective on life is wrapped around that wall. I'm just always going to be that way. My family was always like that. No, God says the wall needs to fall. Yeah, I'm saved. God can do this much, but He can't really do that. No, God says who the Son sets free is free indeed. He can do all things are possible. But what happens is when that wall's been there for a while, we start to, in a sense, just decorate it. We put our whole life around that wall now. This is just who I am now. No. God brings freedom. And we either believe it or we don't. He either said it or He didn't. We either trust Him or we don't. And I've got past the point where I want to live with walls. I should not be decorating what God called me to defeat. And we're decorating what should be defeating. And we need that in our life. We need that to go. And I'm not preaching something I haven't lived. Because I'm going to be real with you this morning. Because I heard this is a real church that talks real stuff and gets raw sometimes. I walked in the freedom growing up. I was blessed. I make no apology for what God blessed me with, but we grew up poor. My family were missionaries. My dad was out of school at 14. There was definitely no degrees. My mum lost her mother to cancer at 12. Then her dad drank himself to death 6 months later. So I had no grandparents. We grew up poor. We didn't have money. They decided to be missionaries. We were part of a movement that just sent you out and said, go for it, good luck, and didn't send any. That was it. So we grew up in really raw situations. I remember being in Scotland. It literally was like, there was no Christmas presents. There was no money. There was no finance. And I remember growing up just knowing that God had us. God was good. They were first-generation Christians. They just believed God. We planted churches all over the world with $20 in our pocket. It was like God just blessed our family. And I remember we moved to Australia and worked hard, started to get my life together. I walked away from God for a few years. That's a different story, but I came back and got radically saved at 26. And I remember just being so excited that God would forgive me again. And within a year, I moved back to New Zealand from Australia. Started helping my father with a church plant. Met a beautiful girl over here, Tongan girl. Got married. And within 6 months of being married, we went out to launch our first church. We had revival, man. I mean that with all my heart. We took over a church that was 17 years old with 30 people in it, and within a year, it just skyrocketed. It just blew up. It was incredible. South Auckland, right there in the hood. It was awesome. Then we felt God take us to a new direction, and I went to start a church with my father, and we co-led this amazing church in West Auckland. And again, God just did incredible things that really began to grow. That was the picture behind me on that picture earlier. That was the church that I was leading, and it was just an incredible time. Celebrated 5 years married. Life was good. Ministry was flying. Things were positive. I was so excited for the future. Some ministry opportunities had come, which were really good. I'm about 32, 33. Things are looking really good for my future. I'm loving Jesus. Got an amazing church. And COVID. Y'all remember COVID? So, amen. Please. So during that season, how many know everything locked down, you couldn't go out, and then slowly they began to open up and just release these small little gatherings. You could go out and have dinner with a couple of friends. So my wife went to a high school reunion. She went for dinner with her family, and then a whole bunch of people said, hey, we haven't seen each other in ages, let's catch up, do high school reunion. Without going into all the details, we hadn't drunk, we got set free, we decided not to drink. It was just our conviction that we weren't going to drink anymore from what we'd come out of, and so we hadn't drunk for a long time. She had a couple of glasses, which was fine, but lightweight, didn't handle it. Guy from high school just began throwing drinks in, and before you knew it, before the night was out, Valentine's night 2020, my wife was unfaithful. At that point, you understand, we're leading a church. My whole life is like this. We had a great marriage. It was happy. It was a crazy, out-of-the-blue moment. She was so embarrassed, so ashamed. How many know that the devil loves to bring shame, condemnation, conviction? Did that make what she did right? Absolutely not. But there was room. But in that process of just hurt, she just said, you know what, I can't believe I've done that. I'm embarrassed. I'll never walk into a church again. I can never see your family again. I'll never see our friends again. And literally ghosted, gone. You got to realize that's my life. Leading churches, I'm happily married. God's blessing me. And just out of nowhere, it wasn't like things were gradually getting worse. It was just like everything was great and then it was gone. And I just remember feeling like I just got clocked. And that, obviously you understand, everything that I had been set free from, maybe some of you can relate, all of a sudden walls. Walls of insecurity, walls of hurt, walls of bitterness, resentment, walls of anger. God, how did you let this happen? Come on, anyone? As if he's the problem. But it gets in there, doesn't it? God, how could you do that? I was serving you. I was living for you. I was preaching your word. I love you. How could you do that? I preached to real people. I remember just every wall suddenly, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. What's wrong with me? Why wasn't I? What did I do? It's just everything came back and all of a sudden walls. I was free, but walls. And then all of a sudden it was like, man, I'll be honest with you. I stood down from ministry, the thing I loved the most. I gave up my career. I had a great career. Gave up my career to do this. All of a sudden I'm stepping down, walking away. I lose the person I love. And to make matters worse, just that month, my entire family had already planned ages ago to all move to Australia. The whole family left. It was me and my dog, y'all. God bless Buddy. Shout out. But I remember in that moment just being so hurt. And I was like, God, I don't know what you're going to do with my life anymore. I felt like it was all good, man. And I remember for about a year, God told me two things. He said, I want you to now live every message you've ever preached. When people were down and out and you said, hey, just keep trusting God, keep showing up. I want you to actually do this. And then he said, every time those church doors open, I want you to turn up and put yourself in the position for me to help you. And I took it, man. I ran with it. I just said, okay. I didn't go back to the world. I didn't go get drunk. I didn't sleep around. I just went, okay, God, I don't have any control over this. I'm broken and I'm hurting. The one thing I was proud of was the fact that I got to the end and went, oh, wow, I'm actually a Christian. And I stayed. That was, sometimes, am I doing this for the right reason? I knew then I'm saved because I still want to go to church. And every time those doors opened, I turned up. You know what was crazy? I went for a year numb. Some of you can relate. I appreciated the message. I enjoyed the worship, but my heart was pretty broken, pretty hard. Knew God was good. Decided not to be bitter at God, but I'll never forget one night, Sunday, 5 p.m. I walked into an Equipper service in the city. We had merged our church just before this all happened into Equippers. And I went to a 5 p.m. service and the worship was playing and a song came on. It was called Altars. That song's so powerful because the chorus says, God, you're so good, you are so good. And I remember I went to sing this. And I couldn't. couldn't get the words out. And I remember just feeling God he literally just said, say it. Say I'm good. I mean, worship is a struggle sometimes. It's warfare. It's a struggle because you are declaring something that has yet not come to pass. You're a way maker, miracle worker. You got to say that when there doesn't look to be a way and when there is no miracle. You are fighting with God for this. Worship is a battle. And I remember him saying, say it, say I'm good. And I remember just getting the words out like, God, you are good. You are so good. And in that moment, I promise you, I'm not a crier, except in rom-coms, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't cry. And I just broke down, man. I'm weeping in this service. And it was like in that moment, everything came back. I got joy back. I got hope back. I got purpose back. I got love back. My whole world, it just like everything came back. And I'll never forget the grace of God just coming over my life again. If I could tell you what God's done in my world in the last 3 years, this last 4 years, God restored my ministry. I get to preach everywhere and anywhere. I've been blessed to preach in the biggest churches, the smallest churches, in communities, on streets. God has just redeemed my life. I get to do miracle crusades all over the world, seeing people healed all over Switzerland and Austria and Slovakia and London. And it is just, I just look and go, wow, he's blessed me with a beautiful girl, Eunice. I'm happier than I've ever been. It's like God has been incredibly good to me. Because God heals families and God heals hearts. I can promise you right now, you're in this place, God heals hearts. But here's the truth about that season when you just go through hell. Anyone ever been there? You're going through hell. Come on, that real people. I mean, life gets real foggy. Can't see in front of you too well. You just, I don't know my next step. You don't know what God's got for your life anymore. It looked like it was going a certain way, then it wasn't. Life gets real foggy. And anyone ever heard of the Golden Gate Bridge? Anyone heard of the Golden Gate Bridge? Have we got a picture of it, actually? I think we've got a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge. You can throw that up. Golden Gate Bridge in San Fran is an incredible bridge. When this bridge was built, it was the largest bridge in the world. Largest bridge in the world, 2.7 kilometers wide, 250 meters high, the Golden Gate Bridge. What's crazy about this bridge is when they started to build it, they had this beautiful vision. We're going to build this bridge. It's going to connect these two parts of the land. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be special. They were so excited about building this bridge. The only problem is they didn't factor in the conditions of that city. Because what happens in San Fran is insane fog. Insane fog and insane wind. So they had a vision. They started building, they were excited. And they started to put this thing together and they started going, this is going to be amazing. Everyone's excited. They rallied a whole team. Got a whole workforce. We're going to build this thing. It's a little bit similar to us building our life. We've got vision. We've got hope. We've got dream. We're going to make this thing's going to be awesome. It's going to be the biggest in the world. It's going to be the greatest. My life's going to do incredible things. And we start with this huge vision. Problem is they didn't factor in the fog and the wind. As they got out in the morning, all of a sudden they couldn't see a step in front of them. Wind was blowing them crazy, and you can imagine they're over this 250-meter drop. It's old school. They haven't got our technology today. And they're in the wind and the fog, they can't see anything. And you know what the problem was? Someone fell. And then a couple fell. And all of a sudden, the vision wasn't so appealing anymore. Because people were falling to their death. They couldn't see in front of them anymore. And here they were in this building that's like, you know what? No kind of building is worth dying for. Ever been like that in your life? I appreciate this, but I'm not dying for this. I'm not getting hurt in this. I tried that before. I'm not doing that again. I'm scared to fall. And here they were in this fog. And they had to work out, well, what are we going to do now? Because everyone stopped working. No one wanted to work, but they were halfway through this project. So we've got to come up with an idea and make this thing work. So that's the Golden Gate Bridge. Have we got a photo of the next one? This is what it really looks like when the fog hits. Hopefully you can pull that one up too. So they start building, like, we've got to come up with an idea on how to make this thing finish. So a bunch of people came up with these crazy ideas. They're all ludicrous because there's really no other way to do it except just to build. And someone came up with an idea which was ludicrous and said, why don't we build a net from this side all the way to that side? 2.7 kilometers wide. Anyone knitted before? Has a big ass net, you know what I'm saying? It's a long time to make that. And so they're like, this is crazy. There's no way we're going to build a net like this. But they couldn't think of anything else for about a month and finally decided, let's just do it. We got no other option. And they built a net from one side to the other. And all of a sudden, fear of falling was replaced by faith in the net. And where people were hesitant to step out before and were worried because they couldn't see where they were going, they suddenly realized it doesn't matter, even if I fall, I'll be caught in the net. You know what's crazy? People fell. You know what they called them? You can Google this. The Halfway to Hell Club. Because they were halfway there, but you know what's awesome about being halfway to hell? You're not there yet. That's what it looks like. And that is a picture of our life sometimes. I don't know what's ahead of me. I can't see a step in front. I have no idea what my future holds. I don't know what direction to go. I don't know if this is even worth it anymore. And God says, hey, listen, you might not see too well in front of you and life might be foggy, but you have a net. His name is Jesus. He will catch you when you fall. He's there. Your fear of falling can be replaced by faith in Jesus. You're here this morning. Broken family. Broken heart, even broken bodies. You say, I don't know what the journey is for. I want to promise you there's a God that when things get foggy, says, don't worry, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. You don't have to walk this alone. I'm with you every step of the way. And I came this morning to Palmerston North to let you know you've got a God that will carry you, catch you, hold you, deliver you, set you free, give you peace, restore your heart, put your family back together. He's a good God. And He's here this morning. And He wants to set you free. He wants to give you hope. To the unbeliever in the house. To someone that's never met Jesus and you're searching for answers. This morning, you can know peace. Peace is a person and His name is Jesus. You can know joy. Joy is a person and His name is Jesus. You can know hope. He's a person. And His name is Jesus. You're suffering with anxiety and depression, suicidal tendencies, emptiness. You have no future hope. I want to let you know you can encounter hope and you can encounter freedom. His name is Jesus. There's a net for your life.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Legacy runs weekly Sunday services. We also run a number of ministries helping the poor. We run an addiction program, a significant social housing ministry, and large community meals, helping show the love of Jesus to our city. If you would like to partner with us, just scan the QR code on the screen or visit us online. Have a fantastic day.